Cornbread is probably one of America's oldest foods. Indigenous Americans learned early on to dry roast corn, grind it in the mill for making bread, cakes, and porridge. So today we're going to talk about the connection between African Americans and cornbread. If you like stories like this, you can find more stories like this at onemikehistory.com. But without further ado, let's get started. Nearly 7,000 years ago, in what is now Mexico, corn started as wild grass before evolving into one of the world's staple crops. This journey into domestication started around 1200 BCE. It was pivotal in the rise of civilizations across the Americas. It saw indigenous tribes meticulously cultivate various strains of this versatile plant. This helped corn flourish in diverse climates from Illinois to Mexico. Maize became integral not only as a staple, but also as a cornerstone of cultural identity among indigenous populations. This was notably recognized in the cultivation practices of the Three Sisters, which is maize, winter squash, and climbing beans, a farming approach that showcased this agricultural tradition. The indigenous peoples' innovations extended to culinary uses, transforming maize into cornmeal, which would become the foundation of a myriad of dishes, including an early version of cornbread. When European settlers arrived in the late 1500s, early 16th century, the settlers encountered a crop that was versatile and adaptable to the challenging conditions in the New World. This crucial introduction led cornmeal's prominence as a staple of settlers' diet, who developed their own version of cornbread, which was primarily cornmeal, water, salt. This differed a bit from the indigenous recipes. During the early days, the southern United States cultivated a prolific amount of corn, since corn could be grown relatively easily and didn't cost as much as wheat. Cornbread became essential food, unlike in the mid-Atlantic colonies where wheat could be grown successfully. In the South, wheat was scarce and was often exported to Great Britain. This made it a luxury item reserved for special occasions. Instead, cornmeal, which was packed with affordability and nutrients, became the staple of Southern households. This set up perfectly for cornbread to evolve, especially when Southern cooks began to add buttermilk, eggs, baking powder to their recipes, making it moist and a slightly sweet dish. Furthermore, cornbread played a crucial role in the Revolutionary War, not just for its nutritional value, but for its convenience. It could be easily carried and was perfect for feeding troops on the move. Families back home were continuously enhancing the cornbread recipe by adding ingredients like molasses, butter, and milk to improve the flavor. It was common to bake cornbread loaves, shape them into patties that were fried, leading to the creation of hoe cakes and Johnny cakes. For enslaved Black folks, daily rations were scarce, mostly constituting corn, leftover greens, animal parts, and molasses. Out of necessity and ingenuity, they developed various ways to incorporate cornmeal into the food preparation, often drawing inspiration from their Native American neighbors' culinary practices. The process entailed creating dough from cornmeal and water, wrapping it in collard leaves, and baking it on hot ashes. These traditional techniques gave birth to foods that we know now as hoe cake, ash cakes, spoon bread, corn pone, and cornbread. Interestingly enough, the relationship between Africa and the Americans concerning corn predates the settlers' arrival. Historical accounts suggest that as early as 1493, a year before Columbus' first voyage, the Portuguese played a pivotal role in introducing maize to Africa via the Congo. This rapid adoption spread maize across Central and Western Africa within 50 years, underscoring the crop's adaptability and importance. By the time of Giovanni Ramunzo's note of an ear of corn in his writings in 1554, it had already become a staple in those regions, marking its significance in this transatlantic cultural exchange. Therefore, the first enslaved Africans who were forcibly brought to America in 1619 encountered a very familiar ally in corn in the alien landscape of the New World. Although cornbread was an ingenious invention born out of the need to stretch limited rations, it also stands as a poignant reminder of the cruelties forced upon those in bondage. Many enslaved people were only allowed a minimal amount of time to eat, prepare meals, causing a heavy reliance on foods like cornbread that could be consumed without utensils and was easily transportable and had a good shelf life, making it ideal for working within the fields. As different variations of cornbread became a staple for the enslaved, recipes eventually made their way from the plantation into the big house and the cookbooks of the elite. While some of these adaptations employed similar methods to ash cake preparation, they were often enhanced with richer ingredients such as milk and butter. James Monroe family, for example, recorded recipes for egg, bread, and spoon bread, and even George Washington reportedly had a penchant for hoe cakes drizzled in honey and butter. During the Civil War, similar to the Revolutionary War, cornbread morphed into a derivative version called corn tack, a staple of both Union and Confederate soldiers, made out of simply cornmeal and water. Corn tack was a product of frugality and necessity and often cooked on open fire, mirroring the exact same methods used by enslaved Black people. Despite its lack of taste and its subpar texture, it was documented in countless soldier accounts and served its purpose of sustaining life during difficult times. In the later part of the 19th century and into the early 20th century, African American communities began to move northward, carrying their rich culinary traditions with them. This period was also marked with the transformation of cornbread. Faced with new ingredients and influenced by cultural and social evolutions, African Americans innovated and expanded on their traditional cornbread into new forms such as corn pone, griddle cakes, corn muffin, hoe cakes, and hush puppies. The story of hush puppies is really interesting in particular because it's rumored to be used by escaping slaves to quiet dogs. However, the earliest mention of hush puppies appears to be much, much later. Indeed, there were similar dishes to hush puppies as early as 1840. However, it seems that they were called red horse bread. This dish wasn't referred to as hush puppies at least until after emancipation. Cornbread continued to be a staple for many families during the Great Depression because of its affordability and its simplicity. Made with minimal ingredients like cornmeal and water, it was a symbol of the resourcefulness of white and Black households and often was paired with greens or whatever could be harvested from family gardens. This basic rendition, known as hot water cornbread, shown its ability to create substance from very little. As America recovered and society overall became much wealthier, ingredients that were previously considered luxuries like eggs and buttermilk became commonplace. This shift allowed cornbread to transform into a much richer, cake-like variation of its former self, changing with the time to reflect the improved living standards with refrigeration or other advancement that facilitate the evolution even further, making cornbread more accessible and versatile. Skillet cornbread, cooked in cast iron skillets, was passed down from generation to generation, and it's a testament to the continued heritage between African American communities. These pans would not only cook the bread, but they carried stories and memories and embedded a sense of family and tradition in each bite of cornbread. This version of cornbread was richer and tender due to the addition of buttermilk and is the cornerstone of Southern cooking and African American culinary traditions. The introduction of Jiffy cornbread mix during the mid-20th century marked another significant milestone. This convenience item allowed families to enjoy cornbread with minimal preparation time. It gained quick adoption, especially during periods of great social change like the Second Great Migration, when African Americans were moving into cities in the West and the Midwest. Jiffy brought the taste of home and comfort during times of great upheaval. The story of cornbread is not just about the ingredients or preparation. It is a deeply tied to discussion of health, socioeconomic status, and cultural identity within the Black community. The legacy of cornbread is a part of soul food traditions and brings up debates about how to balance cultural heritage with the need for healthier adaptations. This conversation reflects the broader change within Black communities, including the accessibility of healthier options and the disproportionate impacts of health-related disease on the Black community. Throughout its history, cornbread has been more than just a food. It symbolizes resilience and expresses cultural identity and serves as a unifying centerpiece for gatherings, whether it was sweetened or unsweetened, made the old-fashioned way, or using modern conveniences. Cornbread embodies the dynamic nature of the Black community's culinary traditions and are constantly evolving while remaining rooted in its rich history. Today, cornbread still remains significant. Cornbread is often served with black-eyed peas and greens during New Year's Day celebrations and Juneteenth celebrations, bridging the past and present and celebrating the enduring spirit of rich African-American traditions. Every slice of cornbread carries a story of struggle, perseverance, and community. Thank you. I'm your host, Country Boy, and this has been the story of cornbread. If you like stories like this, you can find more stories like this at onemichistory.com. Also, I'd like to thank all my subscribers, all my members. Without you, none of this could be possible. And peace.